Hi, everybody. This is Gad Saad. Hope that your weekend has gone well. In light of some of the issues that are transpiring in the Middle East, I thought that it might be worthwhile to read for you an excerpt from the first chapter of the Parasitic Mind. And I do hope that, notwithstanding the fact that I'm providing you this excerpt right here, that you will still consider purchasing the book and supporting those who put everything on the line to defend freedom. So here we go. The Lebanese war taught me early about the ugliness of tribalism and religious dogma. It likely informed my subsequent disdain for identity politics, as I grew up in an ecosystem where the group to which you belonged mattered more than your individuality. With that in mind, let us return to my homeland in the Middle East. Growing up in Lebanon. I was born in Beirut, Lebanon in 1964 and spent the first 11 years of my life in the, quote, Paris of the Middle East. My family was part of the dwindling Jewish community that had steadfastly remained in Lebanon despite the growing signs that Lebanese Jews had a bleak future. My father had 9 sisters and a brother, while my mother had 6 sisters, all of whom, with the exception of one paternal aunt, had immigrated from Lebanon long prior to the outbreak of the Civil War in 1975. My maternal grandparents died prior to my birth. My paternal grandparents left for Israel around 1970. A similar immigration pattern occurred within my immediate family. I have 2 brothers and 1 sister. My eldest brother married a Christian woman of Palestinian origin, and they immigrated to Montreal, Canada in 1974. My sister also moved to Montreal prior to the outbreak of the Civil War, both to pursue her studies and to escape the looming dangers. Finally, my other brother, who had been crowned Lebanese champion of judo on multiple occasions, was forced to flee our homeland due to ominous threats that he should retire, for it was not good optics for a Jew to repeatedly win a combat sport. He heeded that advice and moved to Paris, France around 1973 to continue his studies and judo career. The breathtaking irony is that he eventually represented Lebanon at the 1976 Montreal Olympics, hence the Jewish judoka who was no longer welcomed in Lebanon only a few years earlier was embraced when it suited the relevant authorities. Growing up as a Jewish boy in Lebanon had its existential challenges. I vividly recall when the Egyptian president Gamal Abdel Nasser died in 1970, a few weeks shy of my 6th birthday. Nasser's pan-Arabism, unification of the Arab world, had made him a hero in the region, and as often happens in the Middle East, thousands of people took to the streets to publicly lament his passing. Why would this event constitute an episodic memory for a 5-year-old boy? As the angry procession made its way down our street, aptly named Rue de l'Armée, or the Military Street, the terrifying chant, "Death to Jews," left an indelible mark on me as I cowered in hiding next to our balcony. By the way, as a side note, the exact same chants are being heard in Montreal, in Toronto, in Calgary, right now. History has a wonderful way of repeating itself. You see, even in, quote, progressive, modern, and pluralistic Lebanon, endemic Jew hatred was always ready to rear its ugly head. All calamities in the Middle East are ultimately due to the diabolical Jew. It rained today, blame the Jews. The economy is weak, blame the Jews. Tourism is down, blame the Jews. You contracted a stomach bug, blame the Jews. The Christians and Muslims in Lebanon are not getting along? You guessed it, blame the Jews. And contrary to current attempts at revisionist history, this existential disdain for the Jew precedes the founding of modern Israel by 1400 years. I can still remember sitting around the table on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in Judaism, in 1973, watching the worried look on my parents' face as word broke that a combined Arab army had attacked Israel on that holy day. Existential genocidal hatred is not something that one magically and suddenly contracts as an adult. Rather, it is instilled insidiously and repeatedly in the minds of otherwise pure and innocent children. I was the only one of my 4 siblings not to attend a Jewish elementary school. I must have been 9 or 10 years old, in class at the Lycée des Jeunes Filles, when the teacher asked pupils to state what they wanted to be when they grew up. Typical responses were uttered uneventfully: policeman or soccer player, until one student said, quote, "When I grow up, I want to be a Jew killer," close quote. After which the class erupted in raucous laughter and gleeful claps. I still have the class photos from that era, and that boy's face is forever etched in my memory. In sharing these stories, I don't wish to imply that our daily lives in Lebanon prior to the Civil War was hellish. My parents were well entrenched within Lebanese society. The fact that we were part of the last wave of Jews to leave Lebanon was a testament of my parents' overall attachment to our homeland. Most of my childhood friends were Christian and Muslim, one of whom recently reached out to me as his daughter was about to start college in Montreal. Any hope of long-lasting peaceful coexistence was shattered once the Civil War broke out in 1975. This conflict remains the standard by which the butchery of all other civil wars is gauged. Neighbors who had lived next to one another for decades became instant prospective enemies. Death awaited us at every corner. If the endless shelling did not kill you, we learned to take cover or not depending on the whistle signature of the bombs. The snipers might if you appeared within their field of vision. Civilians were kidnapped and killed. They were also mowed down while waiting in long bread queues. 2 of my family members evaded such a death by going out late to buy bread during a ceasefire. Various militia set up roadblocks, at which point they checked to see your internal ID. In Arabic you call it hawiyya, which had one's religion written on it. If you were of the wrong religion, you could be executed. Our religious heritage was written as Israelite, Israeli in Arabic, rather than Jewish or Yahudi, which meant we had few Muslim friends at roadblocks. Of the innumerable terrifying moments that I experienced during the Civil War, one sticks out in my mind as uniquely eerie and ominous. Prior to the start of the war, my parents had contracted a hand dryer service that provided a roll of washable textile which was installed on the wall of our kitchen. This was a precursor of the subsequent models of disposable hand drying tissues found in public bathrooms. Periodically, the same individual would come to our house to remove the dirty roll and replace it with a clean one. I believe his name was Ahmed or perhaps Muhammad. I thought that this was a rather strange service then, and even more so now as I recount the story. One evening, in the middle of the otherwise endless street-to-street fighting and continuous bomb-shelling, I heard a knock at our front door. I walked to the door and asked who was there. The reply came, "It's me, Ahmed, or Muhammad, the guy who changes your kitchen roll. Open the door, kid." I delayed, and his insistence grew more sinister and forceful. "Open the door now." I ran to my mother. If memory serves me right, there were 4 occupants at our house that evening. My mother, my sister who had returned to Beirut to visit us and was now stuck there, a male friend of my parents who was also stuck at our house even though he lived a short drive away, and myself. My father was not at home. I believe he was outside the country, but I can't remember why he was away. He eventually returned to Beirut and narrowly escaped death on the drive back to our home. My mother approached the door and talked through it with Ahmed, who was accompanied by 1 or more men. The exchange grew tense, and my mother fetched the male friend who was cowering in another room. She hoped he might frighten them away, and I recalled the disgust and anger that my mother expressed for this male friend's breathtaking cowardice in refusing to help. Within the brutality and chaos of the Civil War, there remained some semblance of law and order. As a last-ditch effort and against all odds, my mother phoned the police. The Arabic word for the outfit was 16. In Arabic, you say 16. And they took the call. Remember that this is during a full-blown war. Once they arrived at our house, we opened the door and let everyone into the kitchen. The lead policeman asked the men why they were there and who they were. Ahmad replied, quote, "Oh, my friends and I were in the mountains and we brought back a basket of pomegranate with us. In Arabic you say rumman. And so we stopped by to give it to this family." Close quote. After the policeman, I recall his impressive rifle by his side, checked to confirm the contents of the basket, he stared coldly at Ahmad and said, quote, "Your connection to this family is that you changed their hand-drying roll and you decided to brave the street fighting and come in the middle of the night to offer them pomegranate? If I ever find you here again, you'll have serious problems." Close quote. What happened next still gives me shivers down my spine. Ahmad looked at us and said very coldly and menacingly, quote, "I'll be back for you." Close quote. We did not stay much longer in Lebanon after that incident, and so Ahmad never had the chance to visit us again. It was clear that we needed to leave Lebanon as soon as possible. The day of our escape from Lebanon was straight out of a shoot-'em-up movie. On that fateful day, some armed Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, militia, picked us up at our home. They had been contracted to get us safely to Beirut International Airport. The risk was that they might drive us to a ditch and execute us. The PLO controlled the area around the airport, so there was little chance of clearing the checkpoints if the appropriate militia did not accompany you. One of the armed men asked me if I wanted to hold his machine gun, which I did with excited trepidation. On the way to the airport, I recall my father proclaiming that he had forgotten his money belt at our house and that we needed to return to get it. The militiamen rejected my father's plea, and we proceeded on our precarious journey. The next memory that I have is perhaps one of the most poignant ones of my life. The flight captain declared that we were out of Lebanese airspace, at which point my mother took out a chain with a Star of David, or it might have been a chai, a Hebrew symbol for life or living, placed it around my neck and said, quote, "Now you can wear this, not hide your identity, and be proud of who you are." Close quote. And as a side note, people are now hiding their Jewish identities in Montreal on campuses. Several years later, I asked my parents to fill in my memory lapse. Why could I not remember any other details from our drive to the international airport, Beirut International Airport? Apparently, as we drove through the various neighborhoods, our militiamen exchanged fire with unsympathetic local militias. We were crouched in the car with luggage over our heads. I have no memory of that incident. That's the reality that I grew up in the Middle East. That's a small snippet of my life in the Middle East as a child. It is the reality of many minorities in the Middle East, but none experience it with as great an urgency to escape as do the diabolical Jews. Have a good day, everybody.